today. I'm very impressed that even after a happy hour, everybody wants to hear about launching apps on the AppExchange. Like, that's passion. So I appreciate the turnout. And yeah, I don't know if somebody is going to share my slides or if I should share my screen myself.
Shiba, you should have them in your Slack. I sent you the PowerPoint. Or
yes, I will share it on the YouTube. And
No, right now.
Kathryn, you should be able to share your screen.
Okay, cool. All right, give me 1 second.
You should be able to share your screen. Yeah.
Okay. All right, I think everybody can see this. Let me just find quickly where my speaker notes have gone, and then we'll get started. Okay, so I'm just going to start off with a quick introduction, and I'm going to keep this presentation relatively short. But
I think your screen is a little cut off from the top. It's a little black. Do you want to center it or scroll it down a little?
It should be just sharing full screen.
You can stop share and share again.
I think stop share and share again. Can you? Let's see if that will do the magic.
Of course. We went through this yesterday on a quick tech check. And
Yeah.
no issues. Worked perfect.
Yeah. Now we see better now.
Okay. Oh, that's strange. Okay.
I think it's a little bit cut off from the top, but if you can do a little bit of that magic more. So
yeah.
Full screen.
Yeah, it's full screen already.
Okay.
Sorry, I'm not sure why it's happening.
Quickly, Kathryn, do you have multiple displays or anything different than yesterday? So, okay.
Nope.
Go ahead.
Okay. Well, hopefully it won't cut off anything important. But yeah, to give you a quick introduction, I'm Kathryn. I'm the founder of a company called Candybox. We're a Salesforce partner. We do revenue operations and go-to-market systems consulting. We work primarily with B2B tech companies. And we recently launched our first AppExchange app, and I'm here to tell you a bit about all of that process. Basically, I'm going to walk you through at a very, very high level what it's like to take an app from inception to launch and share some of the lessons that we learned so that if any of you decide to build an app, hopefully you'll be able to avoid a few of our mistakes. So without further ado, this is our app. It's called Custom Quote Sync. It is a free app, like completely free, not freemium. So if anybody wants to give it a try, please feel free. I'm happy to hear feedback as well. What it does in a nutshell is it allows you to sync custom fields on the quote with the opportunity, which out of the box is normally quite painful. And when we decided to publish this app, we thought that it would be also quite a painful and also slow and expensive process because that's what we'd heard. And although there were a few pitfalls and some places where we got stuck or were surprised, I'd actually say that most of the issues my team ended up having were because there isn't a lot of clear information available about this whole process, rather than the process itself being super, super convoluted. So before I dive into the actual lessons, I want to start by running everybody through, again, at a super high level, what it looks like to get an app live on the AppExchange. So here's what that process looks like. Obviously, the first step is you have an amazing idea for the best app ever, and you decide that you want to launch it. From there, you set up something called a partner business org, which if you're a consulting partner, you may have already. And then you would enable that org or another org as a dev hub, and you register a namespace that you're going to use for your app. Once you've got that, you can start building and testing. You're going to usually be doing the development in an IDE and then pushing your code into a temporary org, which is called a scratch org, to do the initial testing. Once the build and test phase is complete, you then package up your app using the Salesforce command line interface. And from here, you can start installing your packaged version in actual sandboxes and dev orgs and testing the packaged version of your app. So once you've tested again, then you can promote the beta version of your package, which is kind of like marking it as the final ready, tested, and approved version of your app. And then once all of that is done, you would submit for the business and security review with Salesforce, after which, if all goes well, it can be listed on the AppExchange. So we went all through all of this to get our app live, but we did encounter some pitfalls along the way. So here is kind of like a accumulation of lessons that we learned that I'd like to share with anybody who's curious about the process or is even thinking about launching an app. So first of all, maybe counterintuitively, try not to think about launching an app as purely a technical process. Obviously, having a well-designed and well-coded app is really, really important, but you're launching a full-fledged product. So I think that thinking through your actual product concept, like the reality of how it's going to be used, who's going to be using it, et cetera, is really valuable, both as you're going through the development process and when you launch your app. Then, as you will see on one of my next slides, you will actually encounter a surprising number of different types of orgs that are involved in AppExchange development. And if you familiarize yourself with some of these ahead of time, it will make the whole process a bit simpler. Then debug logging, if you get that into your managed package from the very beginning, it will save you a lot of headaches for reasons I will go into shortly. Then 4 is, you'll remember I just mentioned in my previous slide, there's kind of 2 phases of testing, first in the Scratch orgs, and then again in dev orgs or sandboxes. Salesforce handles things slightly differently in each of those environments. So you need to make sure that you're testing thoroughly in both scenarios. Again, I'll share a few more details in a second. Then number 5, promoting a package is one of the last stages before your app goes live. Obviously, it's really exciting, but you have to be careful not to jump the gun on this, again, for reasons I will share in a second. And finally, with the business and security review processes, this is something that all apps need to go through, regardless of whether they are free or paid. But as I'll talk you through later, if you do not understand the correct kind of order of operations here, you may end up costing yourself unnecessary time, stress, and money, which may be something that happened to us accidentally. So getting into these lessons in a bit more detail. The first one, these are some of the factors that you will want to think through before you so much as spin up a Scratch org. They're important because having a clear picture of where your app will operate is going to allow you to properly test it in various different environments. And also when you get to the point of actually listing your app, you will need to answer many of these questions. So which clouds will your app be deployed to? This determines the required features and some of the review scope, which editions should be supported. This determines who's going to be able to install your app. Thinking through who's going to be your target user influences how you document your app, you market it, how you design your UI, how you write your listing language, and so on. And then your actual business model, is it free? Is it paid? Is it a combination of the two? This influences your review path at the end of the process and the costs. So moving on to point 2. Another thing that's really useful to be aware of ahead of time is just how many different orgs are going to be involved going through this process. This list contains all of the different org types you should encounter at some point. So first you have your partner business org, or PBO, which I mentioned briefly a few minutes ago. This is where you manage your partner listing and any reviews that you get once you've launched. Then you have something called your dev hub, which is where your packages live and where your app namespace is also managed. It's basically an org in which you enable the dev hub feature, which is what then allows you to manage Scratch orgs and packages from within that environment. A side note here, according to my developer, the process of setting up your namespace is actually a bit convoluted, because although you manage this from your dev hub org, you need to create a separate developer org first to create the namespace, and then you register it in your dev hub org. So that's also something to be aware of. Then you have Scratch orgs. They're temporary environments that expire in 30 days. You use them to test and package your app. You probably won't be actively building in them, but you will be pushing your code into them and using it to test and package it up. And you can also create Scratch org templates, which store your metadata and can make testing a bit easier. And then a final note, if you are using something called first generation packaging, you will also have something called a packaging org in addition to your dev hub. But if you're using second generation packaging, you will only use dev hub. First gen is legacy. My understanding is you only really encounter it if you're building an unmanaged package. So if you're going to be building a managed package, you have to use second gen anyway. So in summary, a lot going on here, but if you know the stuff in advance, it's a little bit less overwhelming. So moving on to point 3, about debug logging and error handling. A lot of first-time ISV partners, they get surprised because when you launch a managed package, Salesforce hides your code. And this is a good thing because it protects your IP. But it also means you can't see errors the same way that you would when you're developing. Once somebody has actually installed the app in like their own org. So if you haven't thought about this ahead of time, you could end up futilely trying to reproduce a generic error like an internal error has occurred, which is addressed better if you build out your own logging and error handling functionality. And even if it's something lightweight, it can obviously save you a lot of pain addressing this after you've already gone live. So next point is about testing in Scratch org environments versus DevOps and sandboxes. So this is probably not relevant to the developers when I say it may feel duplicative to have to test in both environments. But if anybody was considering skipping one of these 2 steps, I would not recommend that. The reason is because Salesforce treats Scratch orgs and installed packages differently because of how their packaging and compilation work. So in a Scratch org, the namespace prefix is retained to avoid any conflicts. And that means any components of your package are referenced with the namespace prefix. But when a package is installed, Salesforce compiles the code and it resolves those conflicts behind the scenes, which means the app will reference components without the prefix. So in a Scratch org, a custom field might be referenced like this first instance with the CBox prefix. But after it's installed in a sandbox or a production org, it removes the namespace. So that's just one example of why you need to make sure to test in these 2 different environments to make sure that everything still functions as intended. And then this one is very simple. It's about the fact that once you've promoted a package, which is a reminder, this is like when you've marked your app package version as ready to go, you actually can't edit or delete it beyond that point. You need to create an entirely new version. So just be aware of this and make sure that you're ready before you promote a package version. And then I think the last one, this is about the business and security review. So before you can go live, you need to pass these 2 separate reviews. The business review is basically checking, are you a legitimate business? How does your product work? How's it priced? Does it have appropriate support info, contact info, documentation, and so on and so forth? Whereas the security review is checking for things like vulnerability exposure, permissions usage, are you compliant with Salesforce's security best practices, and so on. We expected the security review to be really long and kind of painful and expensive and to have to go back and forth quite a lot because that's what we had heard from other people. But for QuoteSync, it didn't end up being true. Our app has a relatively small security surface area. And so in hindsight, my engineer says he probably over-engineered some of the security because we were anticipating such heavy scrutiny from Salesforce. And in reality, the review itself took less than a week. And the team on Salesforce's side was very reasonable. However, a tip from a mistake that we made is go through the business review first, especially if you're launching a free app. Because for free AppExchange apps, Salesforce typically will issue you a voucher that discounts the fee for the security review to $1 from $999. But if you do the security review first, you don't get that, and then you have to spend a long time trying to wrangle a refund from Salesforce's support team, which is not the most fun thing in the world. So avoid that if you can. And those are the main points I wanted to cover. I know I probably went through quite a lot in a short space of time, but I hope at least one thing that I've covered today was new, interesting, or insightful for everybody. I would say I don't want to take credit for my team's work. I really mostly just oversaw this project, but although launching an app is definitely challenging and it takes hard work, it's a great opportunity for both individuals and companies, because you can learn new skills, technical and commercial, and it can really open up a lot of opportunities in the Salesforce ecosystem. So that is everything I wanted to cover today. Thank you again for being here. I really appreciate you listening. And you can email me any questions you have, or you can scan this QR code, which hopefully works, and it should take you to my LinkedIn profile. And that's everything. Hello.
Sorry, I did put the link on for your LinkedIn on the chat.
Cool.
I was just talking to myself on mute. Anybody have any questions? Kathryn may not be able to answer everything, but happy to.
Yeah, thanks for that great presentation. I was a little bit multitasking as we were getting some deliveries and stuff.
Understandable.
Yeah. But there were others, everybody was very... So anybody has questions in the room? Yeah, Krish has a question. I'll be definitely looking, watching the whole thing instead of recording.
If you have a question, you need to unmute. Oh, sorry, you're there.
Yeah, I teleport.
Hey, Krish.
Yeah, it was cool hearing your process. So, so what was your app doing exactly that you got approved for?
Okay, so have you ever used like the out-of-the-box sync quote functionality? Like when you use the quote object and you try and sync it to the opportunity?
I don't think I've worked with the quote stuff, but have you worked with it? Have you worked with it?
Yes, I have.
Okay, sure.
So there are some limitations with it, and I think out of the box, it doesn't sync things like custom fields, for example. So you have to create workarounds and just customizations to handle all that kind of thing. But in reality, most companies do want to sync custom information. So that's like the main use case for...
So you're converting a quote into an opportunity?
No, it's like extending... Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry. You're syncing opportunity and code, right?
Okay, you're syncing opportunity and quote. Yes. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, it's like when you've got usually it's when you've got like the final version of the quote and you want to push the information from the quote back onto the opportunity so that the two things stay in sync.
Got it.
But if you have custom information, then out of the box, like that's not included. So the app is extending the functionality.
What are some common fields you can sync over from the
like out of the box? Yeah, I mean things like the
use cases
for quote sync or
yeah. So you're syncing from you're finalizing the quote and you're like syncing it back to the opportunity, or is it other?
Yeah, so like I'm talking about just the out of the box feature right now. But like when you're quoting, you have to imagine maybe your reps are making like several different versions of a quote for a customer.
Right.
Like that would be one example. And then the customer says, okay, let's go with option A. And so you click the sync quote and it starts pushing the information onto the app. So that would be one use case.